This is the Ancient and Medieval History Lecture for Wednesday, 13th April 2022, or, as the Muslims would have it, 12th Ramadan, Hijri year 1443, and it's the Byzantine Orthodox Christian year 7530, as dated from the creation of the universe, which they calculated to be September the 1st, 5509 BC. So, dating can be fun in so many ways. Not just the heing and sheeing dating, but the figuring out where we are in eternity dating. We were with Woodrow Bleeping Wilson in Europe. Now, Wilson is in fact a highly partisan, divisive, progressive Democrat. And he has, that's one way of saying it, not mine, but it is one way of saying it, he has put through, among other things, legislation on food safety, legislation on labor relations, legislation that creates the federal income tax, which was set up to pay for World War I, which ended over 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, Wilson is responsible for resegregating the American military. Yes, after the American Civil War, blacks and whites were able to serve together. And not anymore, because Wilson grew up in southern Illinois, which is almost Confederate in the way, in his time anyway, they viewed the race question. Oh, and so much more. But Wilson decides that as he, the messianic liberal, the only person in our time that has a Wilsonian attitude and a Wilsonian public image is Barack Obama. Like Barack Obama, a man who won the Nobel Peace Prize for literally being elected president, and that's all, because he was awarded it before he actually became president, between his election and his accession. Because he was just such a guy.
What did he even do?
He was black, and he was he is half Kenyan Luo tribe and half white. Right. But he was the first black president. And that was enough for the Nobel Committee to award him the Nobel Peace Prize.
That makes me think we should.
The man was not helpful to race relations while president. He was also divisive, took sides, and yada yada. When Wilson was getting ready to go to Europe, the way Europeans looked at him was like a messiah. A new world rational progressive coming to cleanse the Augean stable of the old world. And if you don't remember what the Augean stable is, it was one of the great works of Hercules. Imagine a stable so covered in horse and bleh. And what he does is he has to divert an entire river to cleanse the stable. So Wilson was coming like some latter-day messiah, and he ate it up, just like our former president ate it up, President Obama. Wilson came to believe his own press, and he decided somewhere in this process that he could deal with the French and the British imperialists and the Japanese and the various minor countries and even the Germans, but not American Republicans, because they are the ones that are the real enemy. American Republicans drove him crazy like no one else. Why? Because American Republicans stood between Woodrow Wilson and his more utopian America. Wilson once said something that a lot of modern educators would agree with. He once said that a college's true purpose is to make the son as unlike his father as possible. In other words, to re-educate the son so as to be the antithesis of what his family raised him to be. So this is the kind of man that's going to Europe. And he decides that since he doesn't want to deal with those jerk Republicans, he won't bring any. In fact, he won't bring Democrats that are critical of his personal policies. The man ends up believing in his own cult of personality. his own, since the crowds think he's some kind of special messianic individual, then he must be, right? So, doesn't take a single Republican to Europe. And everything he negotiates with the British imperialists, with the French, who are French, with everyone else, the Japanese, the Hungarians, the Germans, everything that Wilson negotiates is from his progressive personal point of view. And then, after getting the division of Central and Eastern Europe into microstates, after getting a League of Nations, after getting the French to agree not to divide Germany up, after negotiating hardcore, after all of this, Wilson finally has it all wrapped up in a bow. The Treaty of Versailles, the New World Order, the League of Nations is going to be the key. And he brings that treaty like a Christmas present across the Atlantic back home to the American people. But Wilson is not a messiah, nor is he a king or an emperor. Wilson is the president of a federal constitutional republic. And our Constitution insists that a president not be able to do things on his own. For example, a president really doesn't have the authority to suddenly decide that manufacturers of gun parts must treat each gun part like an actual lethal weapon. Not that that would ever happen. Biden did that 2 days ago. He's trying to change Department of Justice laws to have any gun parts treated as complete weapons in terms of registration and government records and everything else.
That's President.
Because that'll stop crime. Well, in any event, what a guy. Wilson genuinely believes he's. Oh, by the way, you'll see this when you argue with people over principles, especially as adults. If you raise an objection to a policy that was set up by some group of adults that doesn't include you, that you really philosophically disagree with, often in our feminized workplaces, they will look at you and say, "But we worked so hard. How could you be so cruel? You're just insulting all the hard work we put in," which is irrelevant.
How do you mean?
It is emotional blackmail. I have principled disagreements with the policies that you produced. It's not personal. I assume you worked hard. I assume you're gosh darn great people. You're wonderful human beings, and I'm privileged to be in your presence. But the ideas that you came up with for policy stink on ice, and I'm telling you, we should reconsider them. You don't have to agree, but this is coming from my good place. But we worked so hard. You're just mean-spirited. Well, Wilson has come back from Europe, and he has been treated by the crowds in Paris and elsewhere like the second coming. Yes?
I'm sorry, but because you're a man, you can't have an opinion.
Let me explain to you what's going on here. But first, you're going to have to get me a sandwich. So, having said that, don't worry, my wife gets me all the sandwiches I need. I don't need you to do that too. And she likes it, and she's good at it, and I love her, and it's wonderful. Why? Because she's not trying to be my husband, and I'm not trying to be her wife. We actually work together. We complement one another.
She's not trying to be your husband?
She's not trying to be my husband, and I'm not trying to be her wife. She's the wife, I'm the husband.
Right.
That's my point. Okay. Did you think I said something else?
Yeah.
I thought I was pretty clear. I tried using precise words there.
You were clear. I just didn't.
In any event, he's so horrible. The point is, Wilson worked so hard, and he believes so much, that he presents the Treaty of Versailles, and he's shocked when the United States Senate, which is dominated by the Republican Party, says no. Their reaction is absolutely viscerally negative. And The biggest stumbling block is the League of Nations, which is Wilson's baby. The British didn't want the League of Nations. The French and the others didn't want the League of Nations. This is Woodrow Wilson's college professor utopian reality for a future world order. It's Wilson's baby. And what the senators say is, A, Washington, our first president who established the Republic, warned us against entangling foreign alliances. Well, the League of Nations is the poster child for entangling foreign alliances. We can't be in Washington's spirit and have permanent alliances with people overseas. This is before the Second World War, it's before the Cold War, it's before NATO and the other alliances that we have overseas. So, as an American, the Republican senator said, we can't go along with joining an international treaty organization like the League of Nations. That binds us to Europe, like being tied to the mast of a ship. If the ship goes down in a storm, I'm tied to the mast of that ship. I'm going down too. Blub, blub, blub. I'd better learn to breathe water like my fishy ancestors. But no, we're not going to do this. So Wilson gets a shocking review. Oh, and secondly, not only is this a foreign entanglement, had we been with you, had you invited any single one of us to become part of your delegation, then you would have been negotiating with people who would have indicated to you what the American people and political system would accept and what it won't. But since you didn't bring a single member of the Republican Party with you, you were not negotiating as an American president, you were negotiating as a Democrat president. Moreover, since many Democrats didn't really follow your logic, you were negotiating as Woodrow Wilson, private individual. That's a problem. Even though you, Woodrow Wilson, private individual, happen to believe that the League of Nations is the key to future world peace, we aren't persuaded. And this is a republic, and we get to either agree or not. So Wilson says, fine! And he goes on a whirlwind railroad whistle-stop tour of the country to try to get the American people to write their senators and tell them, join the League of Nations, sign the Treaty of Versailles. And he has a stroke halfway across the country. Because look, I don't like the man or his policies, but I'll tell you, he was a true believer, he did care about it, and so he didn't spare himself. Throughout all these negotiations, he gave and gave and gave and gave and gave. Then he comes back to the United States, he rests on the boat a little bit, and then, he's involved in political combat, and then he's trying to persuade a nation full of isolationists to join an international world order. So, because he cares, fair is fair, he pushes himself past his limits and has a terrible, horrible stroke. So, he goes back to Washington. And for the last year and a half of his presidency, we have a female president. It's not listed. If you have a little, display of all the faces of the presidents, you don't see Edith Wilson's face there. But we've had a female president. Because after Wilson's stroke in 1919, I think, or early 1920, until, I think it was March of 1921, in those days, I think it was March when they shifted power, Wilson was still president. At no point did somebody say, hey, the vice president, whoever he was, I don't remember, should become president now because the president is clearly incapacitated. No, they didn't do that. Instead, Wilson is lying in his bed in the White House. And people who needed something from the president, like a signature or a decision, would go up in small groups, and Edith Wilson would meet them at the door, and she would hear what they have to say. And she'd say, wait there, and they'd often leave the door open so they could see this. She'd walk over to the bed, she'd lean in, and she'd whisper in Woodrow's ear. And she'd be translating what this committee had said to her husband. And then her husband might twitch or something. And she would go, and she would come out and give the president's decision. Now, the man was deeply immobilized because of his stroke. He eventually recovered a bit, but this was a life-changing event. And I'm telling you, he was not telling her what to say or do. It was pantomime. It was kabuki theater. It was a marionette show. He was the prop, and she and the other leaders of the party made the decisions. We have had a female president from Wilson's stroke till the time that Harding took the oath of office, and her name was Edith Wilson. Don't ask me how they did it, how they got away with it, how people didn't clamor for the vice president to become. But after this, and actually as part of the Cold War, after Eisenhower has a heart attack, we're at that point in nuclear standoff with the Russians. We have a constitutional amendment that makes very clear when a president is incapacitated. Now, we haven't tested that yet. There were people in Trump's last year or two who said, the man's crazy, he's unhinged. We've got to replace him with Vice President Pence because he's clearly gone off the deep end. And today we have a president who is showing signs of senility or dementia, or at least he's losing his grip on details. But nobody serious has come forward yet and said that we should switch because the president is incapable to Vice President Harris. Now, I don't like either of them, but honestly, I think at this point, in my own non-doctor opinion, I wonder if it wouldn't be the right thing to do to switch to a person who is at least young enough and healthy enough to bear the burdens of the office. But nobody's asking me, and you didn't ask me, so I told you. In any case, Wilson fails. The Treaty of Versailles is not ratified by the U.S. Senate. Therefore, the United States does not join the League of Nations. Now, that's a problem. Because what that does is it leaves the League of Nations in the hands of the British and the French. And the thing about the British and the French that you may recall from our previous discussions is that they are financially exhausted. They are emotionally exhausted. Their populations have been stripped of their best young men, the most aggressive, the most strong, the best protectors, the best sheepdogs. They're gone for the most part. They were killed in the war, or they were maimed in the war. So they are financially exhausted. They are morally exhausted. They are emotionally exhausted. They don't have the juice to even rule their empires strongly. They're holding on. They're like wizened up little old people. So instead of having the young, vigorous, economic hegemon of planet Earth as the linchpin of the League of Nations, which is what Wilson always wanted, we have a League of Nations that is completely worthless because its linchpins are the exhausted British and French, who don't even agree with one another all the time. I hope you see the problem there. That is a difficulty. So, once again, American politics goes in. Now, this is going to shock you. I actually believe it would have been much better for the world had we joined the League of Nations. Because with American power and American energy and American money, it is entirely possible that as the aggressor nations developed their aggressions, the League of Nations might have done more than send them a harsh letter or a bunch of ineffective sanctions. We might have actually used military force to stop military force. But we didn't do that. So, because of this, because the United States doesn't ratify, because the League of Nations is therefore crippled from its beginning to be a weak and doddering body, because of the power vacuum of these microstates in Central Europe, because of the ongoing Bolshevism in the East, the communists who want to destroy Western civilization. Oh, yeah. And because the Germans have been so enraged by this treaty, You thought the French were upset after losing Alsace-Lorraine in 1871 and being forced to pay an indemnity? The Germans, of all political stripes except hardcore communists, hate this treaty. A, they've got to admit for guilt for a war they didn't cause. B, because of this, instead of rebuilding our country, like we should, we're going to take all the money that we make that's above and beyond our basic subsistence, and then we're gonna give it to the British and French, who will then give it to the Americans. Treaty of Versailles, primary cause of World War II. You want peace? You want it so bad, you come up with a new world order to get it. Unfortunately, there's something that you're just not getting, and it causes the war. At least it sets the stage for what will then happen. So, what happens in the immediate aftermath? Well, we have the rise of totalitarianism. Totalitarianism is not the rule of the podal digits on your feet, on your lower extremities. That's a little toe joke that I made. Nor is Tojo, the leader of World War II Japan, one of your podal digits whose name is Joseph. Oh God, I'm not funny. Oh, really? I know that. I know that. But every so often I feel the need to say misery loves company here. Listen to one of my jokes. So, totalitarianism. Like totally. Totalitarianism, what is it? Well, it is born in this poisonous atmosphere after the Treaty of Versailles, what I call Versailles instability. And in the countries that are the most angry, it takes hold. So, let's talk about what totalitarianism is in theory. Imagine a place where the leader or leaders can tell their ruling party whatever they want to do. And that party can tell the government whatever they want to do from the leaders. And then the government can tell the people whatever they want to do. Leader, party, government. Now, this is expressed today in communist China. Because today, the most powerful or second or third most powerful military on the planet, the People's Liberation Army, which includes, by the way, you're going to love this in terms of terminology, the People's Liberation Army Navy, and the People's Liberation Army Air Force, and the People's Liberation Army Space Forces, all of that is not run by the government of China. The government of China does not have a military. The government of China has police forces. The Communist Party of China is the master of the People's Liberation Army. It is a party militia. So it's not the Chinese government, or certainly not the Chinese people, that determine what the People's Liberation Army is going to be or do. It's the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. If the government disagrees with the party, which they would never do because they're slaves of the party, but if the government ever disagreed with the party, the army would side with the party. In fact, one of the reasons why the People's Liberation Army, as a general rule, is not as strong as it seems to be, is because while up until the present administration, most military training was focused on war fighting in the United States, on learning how to kill people and break their stuff, until they stop being our enemies. From half to two-thirds of a Chinese recruit's time is spent in ideological party indoctrination. In other words, much or most of a Chinese recruit's time is spent learning to be a good communist rather than learning to be a good soldier. So it is the leadership of the party that controls the party, that controls the government, that controls the people. Number one. Now, in a naturally evolved society, there are limits on what government can do. First of all, there are families, the first social institution. You are not owned by me, by the school, by any education official, or by the government. To the extent you are owned by your parents and your God. It is not up to schools, like the Coeur d'Alene School District, to decide what a portrait of a graduate should be. They decide this. What should be the portrait of a graduate? We are educational bureaucrats, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 and we're going to decide what kind of people our schools are going to produce. No! That's not your job. Mom and dad, minister, rabbi, priest, imam, or God, is going to determine, and you yourself are going to determine what kind of person you're going to be. I'm here to teach you history, and I do that in a very intimate, personal way. I involve personal opinions, and I try to discuss things that are from life, but in the end, how you turn out is completely up to you. It's not my responsibility. It's not my business. I am not trying to mold you into being a new and better person. Some teachers definitely are trying to do all of those things. In a society that naturally evolves, families will do what parents are doing around the country and have been for the last couple of years, which is saying, no, we're not going to take queer gender theory and teach it to kindergartners. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do it for second or third graders either. We're not going to take pre-sexualized children and introduce them to not only sex, but controversial, edgy sex. We don't want that. Nor do we want a bunch of other things, like critical race theory. And there is a battle in this country right now, in every school community that has a school board, which is all of us, and at the state level and at the federal level about who controls what's taught in schools. Because we have a naturally evolved society. Parents have rights, citizens have rights, and government organizations like the public schools and the teachers union do not have the ability to trample those rights to produce their idea of a utopia. Yes?
Okay, two-parted question.
Quickly.
One, what's an imam?
An imam is an Islamic minister.
Oh, okay, cool. And then, second, did you hear about what Disney's doing with how they want 50% of their main characters to be black or...
Yeah. There's a video I may show you at some point. It's basically a survey. How many Americans are black? About 30% is the answer. How many Americans are Hispanic? About 30% is the answer. How many Americans are LGBTQ plus? It's about 30% is the answer. No. Blacks compose about 10-12% of the United States population. No more. Hispanics, closer to 15% of the American population. No more. Homosexuals, by census data, or people who are LGBTQ, make up fewer than 2% of the American population. Now, I believe that every person has value, and I believe that every person should have the widest possible freedom. Freedom does not necessarily mean distorting the entire society in order to normalize the behavior of 2% of the population. I don't think they should be persecuted. I think they should be treated like any other human being. But to deny gender as an existent thing for the sake of people who might not think that they are the gender of their body, that's controversial. I may be wrong about it. I may be dead wrong about it. I may be totally wrong about it. But that's up for debate in our free society. I'm not going to have my way. You're not going to have your way. We're going to work it through in a constitutional fashion. That's the point. But in a totalitarian system, which, oddly enough, Disney is becoming in its own little way, the opinions of people don't matter. Their refusal doesn't matter. Instead of being treated like customers, it is arguable that Disney is treating its customers like dependent children. And Disney is acting as if they have the power, the legitimate authority, to decide what kind of people watch their movies. Walt Disney was not a politician. Thank God, because he had tendencies that were somewhat fascistic, and he was a deeply racist fellow by modern standards. He made Mickey Mouse. He made cartoons. He made lots of children happy. That's the job of Disney, not to ideologically train people. I am raising controversial issues as examples. I'm not telling you what to think. I expect that there are people in this room that think that my take on LGBTQ stuff should have gone out with the dinosaurs. And God bless you can think that. We can agree to disagree about policies, but don't think that I'm evil because I happen to disagree with you. I don't think you're evil because you happen to disagree with me. In a free society, we all have opinions. And what we're supposed to do is discuss them, engage with them, try to win the argument by persuasion, not by intimidation, not by violence, not by canceling. But totalitarianism takes away all of that. The will of the vision, the will of the leader, the will of the party, the will of the government becomes unstoppable. No family can stop it. No religious faith can stop it. No tradition can stop it. No philosophy can stop it. No economic limit can stop it. Nothing can stop it. There is no legal protection to say no. There is no private property rights to say no. You are at the mercy of an unbridled, unchecked, unlimited, total power. That is what totalitarianism means. It means that the ideal and the leader and the party and the government have power without any limit over you and me. Now let me look at my notes and see if I left anything out in terms of the sorts of things that normally stand against totalitarian power. No political. There's no loyal opposition. There's no we're gonna agree to disagree. We're gonna have an election. You win some, we win some. No. You're an enemy. You're not an opponent. We will destroy you. We're not going to live with you. In the name of tolerance, you must be destroyed. No legal limit. There is no case of arguing against the party's right to reshape your mind, your body, your soul, your life. Everything is in the party's hands. The party is the sculptor. You are the soft, wet clay on the spinning wheel. You have no private property that the government doesn't give you. So if, God forbid, you decide to go to your nation's capital and protest in a truck, and peacefully protest, and honk your horns from time to time, and try to encourage your government to listen to your concerns, your bank account may be taken away, your children may be taken away, your pets and homes may be taken away. You may be imprisoned. Not that that would ever happen, well, except in Canada. In a totalitarian society, there is no religious scruple. So a Boy Scout organization, which is founded in basically Christian church groups at first, that says for most of its history, we are not going to accept openly homosexual scoutmasters. And we do it as a matter of conviction. We're a private organization. We're not the government. Nobody has to be a Boy Scout. If somebody happens to be homosexual, but they're discreet about it, that's not our business. But we will not accept openly homosexual scoutmasters. Why? Because parents who send their children away to jamborees might be disturbed by the possibility that their scoutmaster might have sexual feelings about them. Whether that's right or wrong, that was the stance of the Boy Scouts USA. Federal courts destroyed their ability to do that. Consequently, the Boy Scouts of America is basically dying. It's not already dead. Does a baker have the right to decide who they're going to make a wedding cake for? In a town that has dozens of bakers, can a baker say, hey, sorry, you want 2 men on your cake? You want 2 women on your cake? That's great. Go here, go here, go here. These are our competitors. They'll do a great job. Because of our religious convictions, we are not going to make that cake for you. It's simply not our thing. Does a person have the right to say that? Well, that has also been taken to the courts. And imagine how it would be if you owned a business, performed a service, and someone came into that business and demanded that you do something that was against your conscience, and said that you are a hateful, nasty bigot if you don't go along with something that goes against your conscience. Does a person have the right to say no to an idea that's fashionable? And honestly, I have to ask, does the couple that want the wedding cake, that instead of going to a competitor who wants their business, but instead insists on forcing people who have religious scruples to violate their conscience, are their intentions genuinely noble? Or are they just trying to grind an axe?
So, I guess my first thought on this is, as an individual, can you refuse to go to a lesbian wedding? Could you?
Yes, of course.
So then,
No, yeah, go on.
is a business or a corporation not considered as an individual?
Depends on the circumstance, honestly. For example, in the South, after the Civil Rights Law of 1964, and this is, by the way a lot of progressive legislation has gone, it's based on the race stuff. After the Civil Rights Law of 1964 is passed, Southern hotel owners no longer can segregate. So all of their rooms are open to blacks or whites or anyone else. Private businesses, because of the historical situation in the South, were not allowed to decide how they were going to run their businesses. So that's the other side. Anyway, go on.
I just think it's kind of funny because you're trying to apply a set of principles to or a set of rules to a business and an individual, but then they kind of change based on when the narrative fits certain parties.
It does. And look, that's why I don't want government being that powerful. To my mind, a government that's involved in who gets married to who is too powerful. It's not the government's role. That's a private thing. It's a church thing. Maybe it's a contract. I don't know. I don't like that. I know that in the time of Obamacare, one of the things that happened was that the federal government sued a group called the Little Sisters of the Poor, which was a Roman Catholic group of nuns, because the Roman Catholic group of nuns did not want to pay into Obamacare, which provided abortions for people. Whatever your feelings on abortion might be, the idea of compelling a group of Catholic nuns to pay for abortions was controversial. In any case, however these cases have gone, whether they've gone in ways that I like or don't like, or you like or don't like, in America, we have these discussions. Because in America, we do not have a totalitarian system. But a totalitarian system abides no refusal. Whatever the party says must happen, will happen, no exceptions. There is no restraint on government power. None. I've said this before. It's like a language without the word no. It's like a city without any doors or curtains or window shades. Everything is public. Everything is the government's business. Everything is the party's business. There is no escape. There is no privacy. There is no self. You are owned, body, mind, and soul, by the leader and his vision, and the party and the government. That's it. Total power to the government. That's totalitarianism. Now, totalitarianism says it's using this power to make a better world. But all modern totalitarians, absolutely all of them, use socialist economics assumptions and theory in order to define what they're doing. What that means is they are materialistic. A totalitarian government cares about this world. It's not oriented towards some notion of the afterlife. It is concerned with how human bodies act and behave in their society while they're alive, and maybe how they die. It is about controlling this world totally. So it's materialist. It's focused on body, not spirit. It's utopian. Every one of these extreme measures that the government is taking is designed to make a better world. A world like we've never seen before. A heaven on earth. A state of true communism. A state of true national being, like Hitler argued. A new Roman Empire, like Mussolini argued. This future is so exciting and wonderful, and we've never had anything like it before because we've never been smart enough or strong enough to seize the day before. All of these totalitarian movements are dialectically based. They're based in the Hegelian concept that conflict brings progress. So a totalitarian state, a totalitarian police state, a totalitarian party or leader, they don't shy away from conflict, nor do they embrace compromise. Compromise is for wussies. What they want is total power. And if you disagree with them, they want you to disagree so that they can crush you, so that they can brainwash you, so that they can make examples of you, so that you will end up, before you die or disappear or go back into the world as a broken example of what happens if you stand up to the party, they will re-educate you and they will force you to publicly recant. That's what it's about. It's about power without limit, not just over your body, but over your words, over the things that people can detect about your thoughts. And you are defined not by your soul. You're not a human being with free will. You are a worker or a soldier or a sailor or a party official. You are your job. You are your job. National Socialist German Workers' Party. The Nazis are totalitarian. Italian fascism. They are totalitarian. They're inefficient, but they're totalitarian. The Japanese militarists that take over Japan. They have a thought police. The Tokubetsu Koto Kai Satsu. They are totalitarian. And, of course, the communist Russians and later Chinese and Koreans and so forth are totalitarian. Now, there is no balance, there is no competition. What's different about Nazis and communists is Nazis believe in nationalism, combined with socialism. We are German. We want the German people's genius to be unleashed. Or we are Romans, Latter-day Romans. We are Italians. We want the Roman genius to be unleashed, or whatever. We are Japanese. We are the descendants of the servants of the God Emperor. We want our national. So there is National Socialism, which is Germany, Italy, and Japan. Fascism, Nazism, Japanese imperialism. But there's international socialism, which is communism. And communism says everywhere on earth must become communist, without exception. You want to know why communism has always failed? Because there have always been non-communists around. You know when communism will work? When the entire planet is communist. When there are no alternatives to communism. When there's no enemies of communism fighting us, undermining us, sabotaging us. We are going to build a new world. Universal global order, no escape, no exceptions. So in this respect, the communists are more ambitious than the National Socialists. The left-wing socialists are more totalitarians, are more ambitious than the right-wing socialist totalitarians. Because the right-wing socialist totalitarians are rooted in a national tradition. That is self-limiting. But the international socialists, they say that no human culture matters. You can be a Maori from New Zealand. You can be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant from Boston. You can be an Egyptian. You can be Chinese, Japanese, Indian from Asia, Indian from America. It doesn't matter. You're a human being, therefore you are ours. Communism is your future, regardless of where your past was. So there is a depiction of totalitarianism. And I will remind you of the two scales of government. The typical scale that's usually taught in civics classrooms is you've got fascism on one end, you've got communism on the other end, and in the middle is liberal democracy. But that's in terms of the words they use. The fascists talk about a national future, communists an international future, liberal democracy talks about a balanced society with limited government. But in reality, the functional scale of government, as opposed to the ideological scale, has anarchy on one end, tyranny on the other, or totalitarianism, and liberal democracy in the middle. Anarchy is the complete absence of government. Totalitarianism is the complete ubiquitous power of government without limit. Liberal democracy says that we have government for what we need it for, but nothing else. There's government that does its thing. There are individual people who make choices about their lives. And the government does not have power over individual people who choose their lives. Individual people are empowered to be their own agents. The difference between liberal democracy and anarchy is that you can be an individual person who chooses your life, but somebody is free to blow your head off without consequences. Anarchy always devolves into chaos because we're not all saints. We're not all college students. We are people who have visceral drives. So that's what's coming. It's not just the influenza that comes out of the horrors of trench warfare. It is totalitarianism. And during the interwar period, we are going to see exactly how totalitarianism is expressed in Russia, in Italy, in Germany, and Japan. Yes?
What is South Korea? Is it like a...
South Korea is a democracy.
Okay.
In fact, South Korea just had an election, and there was a pro-North Korean guy that had been in power for, I think, the last 4 to 6 years, something like that, and a more anti-North Korean South Korean president was elected. North Koreans are communists.
Yeah, right. So I'm doing an essay for my black belt exam, and it's about the history of Taekwondo.
Yep.
And there's this, I don't remember his name, General Choi, I guess.
Yeah.
But he went to spread Taekwondo to North Korea, and so they kicked him off his presidential thing because he was about to go to North Korea and make peace with them. And so
that's interesting. Yeah, no, I actually don't necessarily support those efforts. I tend to think that anything that tries to make peace with the North Koreans as they are is going to give them power in the South, and I think the South is at real risk. Look, their capital city, Seoul, has, I think, 15 million people, and they're within range of over 100,000 artillery pieces, some of which have atomic weapons attached. In any event, we'll talk more, because that's what we do, because we're in a free society. I don't see any other questions, comments, or thoughts. Thank you. Have a good day.